In this video, you'll discover what the most important lessons were that I learned in 2016. Hello, I'm Shane from Active Growth, and I want to make this video because it's a bit of a tradition on the side that every year at the end of the year or at the beginning of the next year, depending on my schedule, I look back at the previous year and I try to kind of condense the greatest lessons, the biggest learnings into a video or a podcast or some kind of a thing. And I think I want to continue doing that because it's even just for me, it's interesting to look back over this development, and it creates an interesting record of how I have basically gone from zero to where I am now, and I really want to continue that. And I know that this kind of content isn't necessarily for everyone, maybe requires a bit more patience than what I often do, but if you do take the time to look at these logs, then I think you'll find it very, very interesting. Now, 2016 has been another great year. In fact, with Thrive Themes, which is still the main thing that I work on, we managed to double our revenue again in 2016, and we're at a size now where that kind of growth is no longer, it doesn't come easy anymore. Obviously, the more often you do that, the more often you double your revenue, the more difficult it gets. But we managed to do that again in 2016, which is a very, very good outcome. And also, our team has continued to grow. And basically, I think once again, I think I might have said the same thing last year. Basically, any metric you want to look at, it has been an incredibly successful year. Basically all the right numbers are going up. So things are going really well. So again, the reason I mentioned this is that indicates that we must be doing something right. And so the top lessons might be valuable for you as well if you are an entrepreneur. Now with that, I want to get into something that I noticed again in 2016 and perhaps more strongly than before, which is that if you're an entrepreneur, and in fact, no matter what level you're at, the success of your business and how your business will do is very closely related to your character, what kind of a person you are, how you do things, how you go about things, how you think about things. I think this is something that we notice when we become entrepreneurs because it's hugely challenging, and how we deal with challenges is very much a question of character. It's also something that requires a lot of growth. You have to do, you have to learn, you have to acquire new skills and all that. So again, it's a question of character. And I bring this up because, well, as I just said before, there's been a lot of growth. Things are going well. We're also very profitable. Like with Thrive Themes, for a while we had growth, but basically we weren't making a profit. Every time we had a bit of money, we'd hire someone new, or we'd basically reinvest everything into the company. But now we're actually properly profitable as well. So everything is great, right? This is the dream. This is what everyone wants. So with that in mind, it might surprise you to hear that this year, or 2016, was probably the hardest year for me ever as an entrepreneur. In fact, it's not, it doesn't quite fit into the year, but certainly roughly September 2015 to end of 2016 was the toughest period I've ever experienced as an entrepreneur. And I came close to my breaking point several times, incredibly difficult times. And that's on purpose. So I could have a much more comfortable life than I have. I could definitely do that. The company, Thrive Themes, is running without me, is running quite well without me. It's like we're getting to the point where I'm not actually needed in this company anymore, which is, again, fantastic, right? This is what everyone wants. So what am I doing? Why am I not just chilling on a beach somewhere? Well, basically it's because I have ambitions to do more. And so I deliberately make things difficult for myself. I deliberately take on large challenges because I don't want to get complacent. And because even at this size, me as a character, my character, what I can bring into the company as me, the person, is important. And so I don't want to be as lazy as possible. or as comfortable as possible. I want to continue growing, and I want to be able to help other people grow in a similar way. Now, what that specifically means is that whenever I get too comfortable, whenever I basically feel like I've more or less mastered the thing I'm doing now, I ask myself, well, what's the next step upwards, right? How can I take this a step further? And for me, that has often had to do with how do I pass on the things that I do in the company to other people. So up until actually not very long ago, I was the entire marketing department of Thrive Themes. It was just me doing marketing. And so I took on, and you can listen to a podcast episode about that. I did kind of an apprenticeship thing where I brought on some people, worked with them, trained them up for several months, and that created then the new marketing team. And then I did the same thing again in 2016. We did another apprenticeship, went way better, right? Second time, obviously, learned from the mistakes from the first time. Second time was way better. And we now have a sizable marketing team with brilliant people to counterbalance all the other brilliant people who are working in development and support and testing and all the other departments in the company. So up until late 2015, we had a great disbalance, much too much on the product side, much too little on the marketing side. And so what I did is bring in these people, did these events to find and train people to have a marketing team. And this was incredibly difficult. It was so difficult to do this. It was so intense to do this for 3 months at a time. I barely recovered from the first one by the time the next one started. Again, 3 months. Incredibly challenging times for me, but also very, very valuable. And I learned a lot and I grew, and it was very good for me. So that is an example of what I mean when I say I deliberately kind of make things difficult for myself. So I don't want to just coast along, right? And I don't, because what also, there would have been many ways to accomplish kind of the same result in a much easier way, right? I could have said, okay, we're going to hire one person, going to start working together with that one person until they can take on most of the stuff I do. Then maybe we bring in someone else, kind of, take it slow. But no, I decided to do it in an intense burst where my leadership skills, my teaching and communication skills were challenged like never before. I decided to throw myself into an environment where I had to grow to be able to survive, so to speak. So it's basically, jumping into the water so that you either drown or learn to swim. And so that's what I did. And that's an example of something I keep doing. I want to make sure that I don't just stagnate, because with the kind of marketing work I was doing, I think I did a decent job, and I was, I knew what I was doing, but I could have easily just coasted along, right? But that doesn't seem like such a good thing to do. That's not as good for my company, but it's also not as good for my personal growth. So when I see like, okay, this marketing thing, I've been doing this in a certain way, I've kind of found my groove, this works. I don't want to just want to keep doing that. And I also don't want to just improve what I'm doing in my groove by 10%, right? I ask myself, well, how can I double this? How can I 10x this? How can I take a large leap? And this whole thing, this again comes down to character. This is something that I choose to do. And overall, in my entire entrepreneurial story, starting from absolutely having no clue, building some websites, trying to sell some stuff, and failing miserably, to now, where I enjoy considerable success, and the things I do are working out really well. This kind of attitude has been a huge advantage for me. It's been a huge advantage for me. On the one hand, because of how it leads to growth. It makes me grow faster than I would if I kind of stayed comfortable. So it means that I acquire new skills and new knowledge much faster than most people would in my position, because most people in my position would take a more comfortable route. And this also brings me to the second point, which is it gives me a competitive edge, I know that I do things that most people would shy away from doing, and that gives me a competitive edge. And that's something that goes into the entire company and everything we do. I have this, kind of these high standards, this attention to detail, this kind of relentless pursuing of more and better is something that we also bring into our products, right? This is essentially a philosophy that we bring into our products, where the same thing, we don't look at, here's something we could do easy, we make this plugin or we make this piece of software and we cash in good stuff. That's the easy route, right? No, we go, how can we make this the best possible thing? How can we build a thing that is the best we can make it, that is much better than the last thing we built? And we are willing to pay the price of overwhelm in the beginning and exhaustion by the time we finish. And again, we're willing to do this because it helps us grow and it gives us a competitive advantage. Another thing that I've noticed is that I now think of building a business as having 3 distinct stages. The first one is starting, the second one is gaining traction, and the third one is scaling. This is useful to think of because in the 3 phases you will face very different problems and you will need very different skills to solve them. So the problem that most entrepreneurs face is the problem of starting. Because, most people try to start and never get anywhere. So that's like the big crowd is at starting. So there your character and your ability to gain skills quickly is super important, because in the starting phase, it's probably just you, or maybe it's you and a friend that you decided to start a business together or something. Right? We're not talking about large teams. We're not talking about large budgets. We're not talking about like managerial and administrative problems. We're talking about the problem of how do we figure out how to get this thing off the ground? How do I get from nothing to figuring out if I can build a product that someone wants to buy? The second phase is traction. So that's if you have gotten something started, you've got something online, you may be getting some traffic, you're slowly growing a mailing list, stuff is happening. Maybe people are buying something from you, but it's not really paying the bills yet, right? It's not really going anywhere yet. So then the question is, how can we take this thing and gain traction, right? How can we get enough people to pay attention? How can we grow our audience to the size where we actually generate real income from this, and we can maybe start hiring people and, pay the bills first of all, and then start hiring people and so on. In this phase, this phase is basically all about marketing. The better your understanding of who you're selling to, who you're marketing to, how they tick, what they need, and so on, the better your understanding of that, the better your understanding of how to get your value across, how to generate, how to create a real strong, unique selling point, the better that kind of thing, the better you will do in the traction phase. And then the third phase is scaling. So at this point, you've got a real business, stuff is happening, and the question is, well, how do we really scale this up? How do we go from, kind of doing this from our living rooms to building up a real team, to scaling this to kind of a worldwide thing rather than just, some people have bought something from me. And there, unfortunately, it becomes a lot about management, becomes a lot about leadership. That's one of the good parts of it, but it also becomes a lot about, administration and that kind of thing, which is, I think, a bit annoying. But that's something I've really noticed, this transition, because now we're in the scaling phase with Thrive Themes. And yeah, like you can tell, I like some parts of that. I really, really don't like some parts of it, but it stays interesting. Now, one reason I bring this up is because I talked about character before, and essentially your character is also something that you have to scale, because what happens is when you build a team is, instead of your character being the thing that matters, it's company culture that matters. And you can think of that as essentially an extension of a person's character, right? You can have a person who's kind of an asshole, you can have a person who has great work ethic, and similarly, you can have a company that's kind of an asshole or a company that has great work ethic, and so on and so forth. So you can really think of those as parallels. And it becomes, of course, a lot more difficult to then create a company with a good culture, create a company with a good, positive character. And this is something that I've struggled with a bit. I think we've been very lucky. We have good company culture, but I feel like it's not really, it's not really my fault. It kind of just happened. But trying to really cultivate that and deliberately steer that a little bit in the right direction, I find very difficult. Now, this is a problem that I can talk more about if you're interested. So if you want to hear more about that, just leave a comment about it. Then one more thing that has been an important realization for me is, or a switch, it has been a change in how I think about things, that is basically a switch from worshiping talent to developing talent. All right, so worshiping talent is a very strong way of saying that, but essentially it could also say chasing talent, where you realize at some point, if you've done any hiring, if you're kind of in the traction or scaling phase, you've done any hiring, you've noticed that there's a huge difference. Like, who you hire makes a huge difference. It's a massive difference between someone who's decent at what they do and someone who's great at what they do. There's a huge difference between, or just looking at how much pain a bad hire can cause and how much a bad hire can cost is incredible. And how much value a good hire can bring, also incredible. So it becomes really important to get the right people on board. And what can happen as a result is that you chase talent, or that you worship talent, right? You want to find the people who are already perfect. And you want to hire the best, right? We only hire rock stars, that kind of thing, right? It's also very kind of a Silicon Valley kind of thing, right? And we had this attitude as well. I had this attitude as well in hiring. Originally, this is how I thought about it, is like, we have to find the best people. Where are the best people, right? What I've realized is that it's really not so much about hiring the rock stars. It's about developing talent. It's about having a system that develops the right kind of people. You can't really expect someone to walk in through the door and already be the perfect person that you need. You have to develop people. And really, for me, it seems like this should have been much more obvious to me, because my personal story is that of development. My personal story is that of going from, basically clueless idiot to entrepreneur. And obviously I had to grow. I had to develop my own skills. And so it should actually have been much more obvious to me that what's needed is not a magic formula to uncover the perfect hires. It's actually a system by which you can help people grow their own skills and help people become the best version of themselves in the context of your company. So this kind of brings us back to the whole thing from the beginning, where things like character and how you learn, and what your attitude is, and how you acquire skills become really important. When you get out of the starting and traction phase and into the scaling phase, it stays just as important. It just shifts from me developing my stuff to how do I help other people develop their stuff. Because my personal work, now that we have about 50 people or so working at Thrive Themes, my personal input just isn't that important anymore. So it's not important whether I can get a bit better at something. It's important whether I can create a system that helps other people get better at what they do. So those are the top lessons that I've learned in 2016. And as you can see, there's kind of a thread that goes through this, which is actually, this is not a deliberate narrative device. It really is something that all of the things I noticed can kind of be brought to come around this same thing about character and skill development that has remained central to what I do, and I've been reminded of the importance of that. Now, one more thing that I want to mention, even though I started out with maybe a scary kind of idea that you do hard things, and even if you're super successful, you can still have the hardest year ever, and if you want a competitive edge, you got to work super hard and so on, right? That's my kind of message. It's the way I do things. But at the same time, I also want to say that I have a deep appreciation and just a pure love for what I get to do here. So I also want to be clear about that. Even though I always challenge myself and I try to not get comfortable, and things have been really difficult, I also just have a pure love for what I get to do, for this creative work. It's still my favorite thing to do in the world, is to create something out of nothing. and I can now do it with a team of amazing people, and learning and growing like this is the best thing ever. So while it has been a very hard year for me, it has also been an extremely successful year, and I wouldn't change a thing. I've loved every minute of it, even the ones that were really, really difficult. All right, so those are my thoughts, the looking back at 2016 thoughts. I would like to know what this, what this brought to mind for you. Also, if you have any questions about the things that I've talked about, just leave a comment below, ask away, and I'll be happy to answer. And let me know, does this remind you of something that you've experienced? Has it helped you understand something that you maybe been going through? What ideas has this sparked for you? Let me know by leaving a comment.